Hello guys, welcome to JHook, and in today's session on the Kubernetes series, we are going to see how to set up Nginx controller along with the HAProxy load balancer. As you can see on the screen, this diagram seems to be a little complicated, but we are going to break down into the steps and we are going to cover each and every topic one by one. As a step number one, you need to have a Kubernetes cluster. And if you are using cloud services such as Google Cloud or AWS, then you might have this Kubernetes cluster setup already done. But in this tutorial, I'm not going to use any cloud service provider. I'm going to set up all Kubernetes cluster, HAProxy, and Nginx controller on my local development machine. So first thing, which is a requirement over here, is the Kubernetes cluster. So you need to have that Kubernetes cluster with you. In the description section, I'll put down the link for the how to set up Kubernetes cluster using Kubespray. That is one of the simplest way you can set up a Kubernetes cluster on your local development machine. So that's the first primary requirement you should have. And I have prepared that session also. So I'll put down that description, that link for that video into the description section. Okay, so proceeding to the step number 2, I'm assuming you have done all the Kubernetes cluster setup on your local development machine, or either you're using any of the cloud service provider. Okay, so in step number 2, what we are going to do is we are going to set up the HAProxy. So HAProxy is a load balancer, and as you can see on the diagram is step number 2 here. So we need to set up HAProxy, and this HAProxy will sit outside of a Kubernetes cluster. So this is the HAProxy which will be accessible for end user. As you can see, this user will make a request to front end, and I'll explain what is front end and back end. But this is the only accessible part which is exposed to the outside world. So user can only access HAProxy, and in HAProxy will load balance to the backend, and backend where we mention the IP address. So for example, here the IP address is 100.0.2. So this is the backend which is configured to with the host IP and with the port number. So yeah, we need to set up this HAProxy, and that will be done outside of our Kubernetes cluster. So that is the step number 2 which we need to do. Moving to the step number 3, we need to set up the Nginx controller. And as in the diagram you can see, Nginx controller sits inside the Kubernetes cluster. So that means you cannot access Nginx controller directly. So there has to be a way. So the way is HAProxy backend will be able to access our Nginx controller. So that's the way a user access the HAProxy, and from HAProxy it load balance to the backend, and then backend is able to access the Nginx controller. And Nginx controller is sitting somewhere in your Kubernetes cluster. So this is the step number 3 where we are going to set up the Nginx controller inside Kubernetes cluster. Okay, moving to the step number 4, we need a Docker image which is running inside a Kubernetes cluster. So for that, in the step number 4, we are going to create a deployment and expose that deployment of a Docker as a service. So that service will be accessible by Nginx. So as you can see now, it makes sense. Like Nginx controller will be able to communicate with the services which we have exposed, and that Nginx will communicate to backend, and backend will communicate to frontend, and then frontend finally will communicate with the end user. So this is the flow which we are going to implement in this lab session. So this is our Nginx controller, which is sitting inside the Kubernetes cluster that is communicating with the services, and that services we are going to expose after the deployment. So yeah, and this whole tutorial, I'm going to use a Spring Boot application that will have a microservice, but in your case, you can take any application, which is like a Node.js or any application which has a microservice, or you can deploy any other application. But the mandatory thing is you need to have a Docker image. Okay, so let's proceed with the lab session. For the lab session, I have prepared a guide, and I'll put the link into the description section of the video, and you can follow this guide, and all the commands which we are going to use are available into this guide. So if you forget any of the command, then you can come back and refer to this guide. Okay, so moving further, What we are going to do, I'm going to follow the same step from the guide and perform the same thing on the left hand side onto my terminal. Okay, so I have prepared some steps which we need to follow. So these are the steps what we are going to do. So step number one, set up Kubernetes cluster. So I already told you there is a separate video which I have already prepared. It's something similar lab session which I have done. So you can click here and also put that link into the description section so you can follow that tutorial. Okay, so I have already set up the Kubernetes cluster here. So step number one, which is already done by me. So that is the primary requirement, as you can see in the diagram here. So this was our step number one, where we need to set up the Kubernetes cluster. And how to verify it? So go back to your terminal and run the command kubectl get all. So if you have a very plain Kubernetes cluster up and running, then you will get this service Kubernetes running on a ClusterIP. So this is the default Kubernetes service. So that means your Kubernetes cluster is set up properly. Okay, so our step number one is done. Let's move to the step number second. Moving to the step number second, we need to install and set up the HaProxy on our Kubernetes node. And for that, first of all, you need to run the command sudo apt-get update that will update your repository packages. Once it's done, you need to install the HaProxy. And for that, the command is this. Just copy this command and run it over here. Okay, so I think our HaProxy has been installed, and you can verify by running the command HaProxy version. And as you can see, this is the HaProxy version which we are running on our Kubernetes node. So that means our HaProxy has been installed. There is one more step which you can verify by going into or just using this command cat. And this is the HaProxy configuration file. So that should be available once you install the HaProxy on your system. So that means our HaProxy has been installed. Let's move to the step number third. And in the third step, we need to update the front end as well as the backend configuration. What does it mean? So if we go back to our diagram, so here we have mentioned this is the front end where our end user is going to access, and this front end is going to communicate with the backend. So this backend is actually communicating with the Kubernetes cluster. But for this step, we are just inside this front end box and backend box, and this is our end user. So we need to first of all configure the front end and then backend. So just jump back to your terminal and guide, and this is the front end configuration. So copy this front end configuration. I'll explain what does it mean. So I'll copy it and go to, I'll just clear the screen here so that sudo vi, and we need to go to the path. Sorry, this is the path, or we need to edit this file. Okay, so now I'm into the edit mode. Sorry for this beep, it's just a system sound coming from my laptop. Okay, so here I'll paste this configuration. Sorry, this is not the correct configuration. We need to copy it and paste it over here. So this is our front-end configuration, first of all. Then second, we need to copy the backend configuration. Copy it. And there should be a space, one line space when you copy the configuration. So I'll paste it over here and I'll save and quit. We can re-verify this by running the cat command. So yeah, you can see we have added these two configuration, and this one is front end, one is back end to our HaProxy configuration file. So our front end is local server. The name of the front end is local server, and it will be listening to all the requests. So we are not specifically looking for any port number, but we are looking for any request. So the mode is HTTP. So this local server, which is our front end, it is going to communicate with the K8 server. So that is our Kubernetes server. So where we have defined this K8 server. So this K8s server is defined it as a backend. So now you can see this is the linking. This is the name of our backend server, or not server, but this is the name of our backend in HAProxy, which we have mentioned in the front end, so that front end knows where to find the backend. So this is our backend server. The mode is again HTTP. The balance is round robin. So it's like a round robin fashion whenever, let's say, if three users are making a request and we have three servers. So it will round robin each server. So first request will go to server 1, then second request will go to server 2, and then third request will go to server 3. So this is the round robin fashion in which we are going to entertain our user. And this is going to talk with our Kubernetes cluster, and the IP is 100.0.0.2 and running port is 8080. So this is just something similar from here. So now you can see this is our front end, this is our back end, which is running on this IP and port number, and which is communicating with the Nginx controller. But yeah, we are still in step number third, where we are configuring front end and back end. Now, once you have made those entries in your HAProxy configuration file, you need to verify the HAProxy configuration, whether those entries are correct or not. So for that, you can run this command that will tell you if there is any configuration error with your HAProxy configuration. So you can see the configuration file is valid. That means our configuration is correct. And now we can apply this. Okay, so moving to step number 4, where we need to set up a Kubernetes Ingress controller. In the step number 4, we need to first clone the Kubernetes Ingress repository. And for that, you can follow this git clone URL over here. I will copy the URL, paste it over here. Okay, now we we cloned the Kubernetes Ingress URL. Now we need to switch to the directory Kubernetes Ingress deployment. So just change to the directory Kubernetes Ingress and deployments. Moving ahead, we need to create a namespace and service account for our Kubernetes Ingress. But we don't need to create this configuration manually. It is provided by a Kubernetes Ingress by default, which we already cloned it. So what we need to do is we need to run this command. So it will go into the common directory, and inside there it will find the namespace service account YML. We need to copy this command and go to the terminal and insert. And as you can see, we have created the namespace as well as the service account. Moving further, now we need to create a cluster role and cluster role binding. And again, it's provided already by a Kubernetes Ingress, so we just need to run this command. And the YML configuration is named with RBAC. So copy this command, head back to terminal and execute this command. And as you can see, it has created the cluster role over here, and this is the cluster role binding for our Nginx Ingress. Moving further, we need to create the app role, and for that we need to run this command. I'll copy it, I'll paste it over here, and I'll hit enter. Okay, so I have previously created, that's why it's showing unchanged, but you can run this command for app role. Okay, the next thing which we are targeting is the default server secret, which we needed for Ingress controller. And for that, again, we can use this command, and all the configurations are already provided by Ingress. So I'll paste it over here. And now, as you can see, the default server secret has been created for us. Moving further, the next step, what we need to do is we need to create the Nginx configuration. And for that, we have that nginx config.yml available under the common directory. So you can copy this command, and we need to create this configuration. Okay, so now we have created that configuration. In the next step, let's create the pod using the deployment. And for that, we need to use this command, and which the configuration which we are going to use is nginx ingress. That is available under the deployment directory. So I'll copy it and paste it over here. So now we have created the pod using the deployment. In the next step, we are going to start our Nginx Ingress as a daemon set, and for that the configuration is available under the directory daemon set, as you can see in the command. So I'll copy it and I'll paste it over here. Okay, so I have created that configuration now. The next step, which is the last step, where we are going to check our namespace, because all the commands which we are running throughout this session are available under the namespace nginx ingress. So this is the command where we are going to check all the container images which is running under the namespace nginx ingress. So this is the default namespace, or the namespace which we have created for nginx ingress. I'm copying this command, and this is a very simple command. And here you can see all the pods which are running with the nginx ingress name, and the ready state is 1/1. So all the pods are up and running, and the status is also running. And that has started almost 44 second ago. This was the previous one which I have created. So yeah, we have applied all the configuration successfully, and our nginx pods are up and running. Okay, till now, whatever steps we have done, we have set up the nginx controller, but not the nginx resource. So what's the difference? I'll tell you in a bit, but just to remember, like there are two steps which we need to do. First of all, we need to set the nginx controller and then ingress resource. So what is the ingress resource? I'll show you the configuration that will make more sense rather than explaining. So here you can see this is the ingress resource configuration. So here we are defining the service port and the service name, demo service, and this is the host. So this host is something which is accessible from outside of the cluster, or this is something, a domain name like google.com. So this is the host name which we are trying to target. Okay, so we will access our service using this host name, but that service internally using the name as a demo service. So this is the service we are going to expose in our Kubernetes cluster with the name demo service, and that service will be running on the port 8080. So this is the ingress resource that we need to create. But there is a catch. What we need to do is, before we create this nginx resource, we need to have this service up and running on the port 8080. Okay, so till now we have set up the nginx controller, but we haven't created this service yet. So before we create any nginx resource, the first thing which we need to do is we need to deploy this service, or we need to create or expose this service. Okay, so let's go back to the steps where we were. So if we go back, so we have completed the step number 4, and we were here, so where we have created all the nginx pods and the containers. Now in the fifth part of this tutorial, you can see we have created a deployment. So kubectl create deployment demo. So this is a one Spring Boot application, a very simple hello world microservice which I'm going to deploy. You can, if you're trying it out for yourselves, then you can pretty much run this command. It will work flawlessly for you. But if you have any other container, then you can just use that Docker image. But anyway, moving further, I'll copy this command. So it will going to create a deployment. Okay. So on the left hand side, I'll clear the screen. I'll show you kubectl get deployment. So here you can see there is no deployment which is running previously. I'll clear the screen. Okay, so demo deployment has been created. Let's check the status of the deployment. Kubectl get deployment. Okay, so here you can see now our deployment has been ready and it's available. Okay, so now we have done the deployment. Now we need to expose this deployment as a service. As I showed you in the Nginx configuration XML, YML, here you can see this is the demo service. So just check here whether you have any service up and running or not. So here you can see this is the default Kubernetes service, which is there. This is the one. We don't have any service with the name demo service. Okay, so now we are going to create this service, or what this service is going to do is this is going to use this deployment, which we have deployed here. Okay, so how to do that? Just go back to the guide, and we have done this deployment. We have checked the deployment. So this is the command. So what it's going to do is kubectl expose deployment. The deployment name is demo. Okay, here you can see the name, and this is the name which you can refer here also in the cluster. And we are going to expose, sorry, not the expose, but we are going to assign the type as a cluster IP, and the name of the service would be the demo service. So this is, you have to be a little careful. So you need to keep the same name which you are going to put inside your Ingress resource. Okay, so the deployment name is demo, which we have already done the deployment. The next service we are going to create is the demo service. So the name should be demo service. You can keep whatever you want, but just keep in mind you need to keep the same name in your Ingress resource. And the port, as I told you, we need 8080, so I'm going to expose it at over 8080. Okay, so now I'm going to copy this command and insert here. Okay, so here you can see service demo service has exposed. We can check also. I'll clear the screen. kubectl get service. And previously when I run this command, we were able to see only the Kubernetes default service. Now we have a demo service, which is of type cluster IP running on this cluster IP, and the port is 8080. Here you can see the same command which I have mentioned over here also, but it's little different because I'm just specifically looking for that particular service. So you can copy this one also and you can run it. So it will show you the service named with the demo service, but the previous command will show all the services which is running inside our Kubernetes cluster. Okay, moving ahead, we need to create an Ingress resource, and for that we need to create a Ingress resource YAML. So I think I have probably created this Ingress resource already. So yeah, I have created this configuration already for me. But you can use this command as a touch, and then you can create a file and you can paste the content of this configuration inside it. I can show you. So this is the content which I have updated here. It's the same here. So that you can do it. I'm not going to do over here in this session. Okay, the next thing which we need to do is we need to apply this configuration, or we need to create this configuration. So copy this command, and the name of the file should be ingressresource.yml, because this is the file which we have created here. So the file name should be same, otherwise it will just complain like file not found or something. I'll paste it over here. Okay, as I told you, I have already created, so that's why it's showing me already exist. So in your case, it will not give this error to you. But yeah, you know the basics now, why and how we need to create this Ingress resource. Okay, so once you create that Ingress resource, you can show or describe the Ingress resource using this command, and which is kubectl describe ing for Ingress and the name of the resource. So that is Spring Boot Ingress. This is the resource name, and you can find this name in the configuration. So this is the configuration name which we have put it. Okay, so this is the command like kubectl describe, and the resource which we are looking for is of type Ingress. So ing for that and the name of the resource. I'll copy it and paste it over here. And here you can see this is the name, Spring Boot Ingress, and the namespace is default. And yeah, there are rest of the things inside it. So everything is running fine here. So the host name is jhook.demo, as you can see, jhook.demo. That's the host name which we will be using. And what else we need to check? I think we are good to go here. So now we have created the Ingress resource also. So now we have HaProxy. I'll jump back to the diagram now so that it will be clear to you where it is. Yeah, there it is. So I'll maximize it a bit. So now we have HaProxy installed on our system, on our Kubernetes cluster. Next, we have set up the Ingress controller, also Nginx controller also, and we have created the Ingress resource also. Third thing, we have deployed our Spring Boot application, which is a Docker image, and we have exposed that as a service. All right, so this whole setup is now ready for us. There is a one thing which we need to do. That's the host name which we need to create, that I'll show you. Okay, let's go back to terminal once again, and I'll maximize it a bit. I'll clear the screen here, and we are still inside our Kubernetes cluster container. So I'll exit it from here and I'll clear the screen. So now I'm on my local development machine, which is my laptop. And what we need to do is we need to create the host name. And as you can see in the diagram, the host name which we are going to create is for the IP 100.0.0.2. Okay, and yeah, what we need to do is vi sudo vi etc hosts. I hope I have already created it. I'll put the password. Okay, so here you can see this is the IP address and the host name which we are going to create is jhook.demo. And why I am creating this, because in the Ingress resource I have defined this host name, so I cannot keep anything else. So you have to be very careful. So here you can see this is the host name which I have defined. So I'm going to create a host name jhook.demo and assign it a IP, this one. Okay, so let's quit from here. Let's go back to the browser, and what we are going to do is we are going to access the endpoint. So it should be jhook.demo/hello. Okay, so as you can see, now we are able to access our REST endpoint using this URL, and this is something the host name. Since everything which we are doing over here is like a local setup, but if you are using any cloud service provider and you already have your domain name which is with you, then you can assign that actual host name in the Ingress resource, and that will look up for that particular service using this configuration which I showed you here. So here you can put the actual host name or the domain name which you have bought, and that will look up for DNS, and then it will route it here to the HaProxy, and then it will go to the Ingress controller, and then it will access your microservice. So yeah, this is the session which I have planned, and this is the end of this session. I hope you liked the today's session on how to set up your HaProxy along with the Kubernetes Ingress controller and the Nginx resource, and to expose any services from within the Kubernetes cluster. And if you like to have a similar content, then go back and check my channel. I have previously took the sessions on how to set up your Kubernetes installation on Ubuntu, CentOS, and automating it using kubespray. So these all are like something which you can do on your development machine, and you don't need to have any cloud service like a Google Cloud or AWS or something like that. So you can pretty much run this Kubernetes cluster on your development machine and you can practice it out. And if you have something similar content in your mind which I would like to prepare any session or demo, then please put into the comment section, and also please subscribe to my channel. I keep on posting weekly this kind of a videos or sessions, and also check my blog that is jhook.com, so where you will find all the commands which I have used over here. So everything is available here. So you can check this blog also if you forget any command or something. So everything I have documented over here in this blog, so which is pretty handy for you. Okay, then have a nice day and see you into another session. Bye bye.